So you're thinking about moving to Florida, and you've heard the good and you've heard the bad. You're not really sure what to expect. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about the top 5 things you should think about to avoid moving to Florida. My name is Ray Fernandez. I'm with Living in Palm Beach, Florida, powered by eXp Realty. Welcome. If this is your first time to our channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button there over in the corner. While you're at it, ring that bell. What that'll do is that'll help notify you each time we put out a new video. We put out new videos every single week. We talk about all things going on in South Florida, so if you're wondering what it's like to eat, sleep, and drink here in South Florida, this channel is for you. My family and I relocated to here in sunny South Florida 16 years ago, and we haven't looked back. Today, we truly find an honor to help people, perhaps like you, do exactly the same thing. We have helped guide so many people understand what Florida is all about, and we absolutely love it. So if you're thinking about moving here to Florida, and you have questions, and you want advice from people who have actually done it before, well, there's a few ways to get a hold of us. Down below is our email address. That's one great way. Also on the screen, you see our phone number. You can either call or text that phone number. 2 of the best ways are in the description, and in the comments section there's a link. Click on that link. What that'll do is that'll help set up some time for us to speak either through a phone call or through a Zoom, whatever way you feel most comfortable. In any case, we have your back when it comes to relocating to here to sunny South Florida. Today, I'm going to go over the 5 things. If you can't handle these 5 things, you should not move to Florida. I'm going to save the last one for the one people most often speak about, and probably the most important if you're considering moving to Florida. The number 1 reason why you should avoid moving to Florida is the people. Florida is like no other. Florida is made up of very, very transient people in general. I think that's changing a little bit as more and more people are calling Florida their full-time home. But in general, and over the years for sure, the state of Florida as a whole has been a state where a lot of people come and go, and as a whole, it is one of the most transient places when it comes to people moving and coming in and out of Florida. Florida is a big tourist state, so you have a lot of people here that don't necessarily live here all the time, especially in the winter. The winter time in Florida, the populations in many areas swell. As an example, on the island of Palm Beach Island, literally the population in the season, which is October to April of the following year, swells 3 times. So you have 3 times the people in season in lots of places in South Florida and in Florida as a whole. Before I go to the vacation part of it, I want to tell you my experience, my first experience many years ago when it came to Florida. I'm originally from New York, and one of the things that struck me, again, this is in regards to the people, one of the things that struck me, especially coming from New York, which is a very fast-paced environment, is life here is, and people take it, life here is very, very slow. I remember when I was in my college days, we took a trip from the Buffalo, New York area. Not where I'm from, but I went to school in the Buffalo, New York area. We took a bus all the way down to Fort Lauderdale, and one of the things that struck me once we got here is that people just take it really slow. I remember waiting online in a Wendy's and watching people clean the tables, and I'm like, how do you do this? How do you go around life treating life so slow? And I still to this moment don't get it. I get up early. I get my work done. I live a very fast-paced environment. You see me running through Walmart or Target or any of these stores with my cart. I just like to do things fast. If you are someone who is into that or used to a fast-paced environment and you just cannot tolerate people being that slow, you need to avoid Florida. A lot of people come to Florida on vacation. So you have a lot of people. It's sort of like when I lived in New York City, I lived in Manhattan, and used to see the tourists taking the pictures of all the tall buildings and so forth. Florida's the same thing, but in a different area, in a different way. We have a lot of tourists here. So you've got a lot of people that just aren't from around here. If that's something that bothers you, you need to avoid Florida. We get a lot of snowbirds. You've heard the term snowbirds. Well, there are a lot of people that have Florida as their second home. There are a lot of people that maybe not every year come here, but there are a lot of people that come here during the season. Season in Florida starts technically around Columbus Day, but really it starts around the end of the year, like around Thanksgiving time. It goes through April. It is the best in terms of like the weather and humidity. So people come down here when wherever they live up north, as an example, gets cold. It's their escape. So we call these people snowbirds, and many people, by many accounts, these people are annoying. Of course, not all snowbirds are annoying, don't get me wrong. But what I mean is some of them can feel entitled. And so you have to deal with sometimes an attitude and so forth. These people, remind you, they're not here. They don't treat Florida like their full-time home. And they sometimes let you know it, how much greater it is where they live. So if tolerating snowbirds and people such as that is not for you, you need to avoid moving to Florida. I'm going to segue into number 2 reason why you need to avoid moving to Florida is the traffic. It's not just the traffic, it's the driving. And it comes back to some of the things I started speaking about in point number 1. So we have a lot of the driving here is terrible. It is horrendous. Now, I've driven in so many places in my life. I lived in Manhattan for 11 years. I've driven through Manhattan. And while it's aggressive, there's a system to it. These people are used to driving in New York City and other places. I've lived in other places outside the city, but it is by far the worst when it comes to driving here in South Florida and Florida as a whole. And there are a few reasons for that. The reasons why Florida is like that. First off, there's no transportation system that is going to be as elaborate as what you have in New York City, as an example. There's no real. There are some train rails and stuff like that, but there's nothing as elaborate as what you have in other metropolitan areas. So we, like as in Miami, they rely pretty much on driving their car everywhere. They have express lanes, as an example. Like when you drive from where we are here in northern part of South Florida, which is Palm Beach. If you drive through on the turnpike, they actually have express lanes, and there are certain times when those express lanes, believe it or not, cost more money. So you will have an express lane. If you take this at this time of day, it'll cost you this. If you take, send me $10. If you take this express lane, it's going to be, or at a different time, it's going to be $3. It is silly. There is a lot of traffic in Florida as a whole. People are moving here. So it's getting worse. So there's a lot of there's a lot of issues when it comes to traffic. And part of the reason why it's like this, as I mentioned in point number 1, to avoid moving to Florida, there are a lot of snowbirds here. There are a lot of people here that when vacationers, people that are not used to the roads, they're not driving these roads all the time. That creates people who don't know where they're going. That's a problem. So you have busy roads. People don't know where they're going. You have people, believe it or not, from other countries as well, especially South Florida. It is an international area, and you'll have people that drive on the other side of the road. So anyways, the people who don't know what they're going, don't know the rules of the law, rules of the road, and mind you, we have a fairly large population that is older. It's sort of changing. Florida as a whole is in that regard. But we do have, in general, the population here is a little bit older because people do come to Florida to retire. They make their money in places up north like New York, Chicago, maybe out west, LA, maybe Las Vegas, all the places up north. And then they come to Florida when they're older. So, and as you can imagine, as people get older, their driving skills are not necessarily as sharp. I like to think mine are still fairly sharp. Maybe I'm wrong. But what I'm getting at is that there are some people maybe that shouldn't be on the roads. People don't know where they're going. Transient people, as I mentioned, a lot of people come and go. So all these make for one of the worst driving areas in probably the whole country. So if you can't handle bad traffic, people not knowing where they're going, and all kinds of mess when it comes to driving on the road, then you need to avoid Florida. The number 3 reasons why you need to avoid moving to Florida is we have crazy, crazy wildlife here. When people come here to consider moving to Florida, our team, one of the most asked questions, believe it or not, is, are there alligators here? I'm like, yeah, this is Florida. We have alligators. I wouldn't say they're all over the place, but they live here. In fact, they were here before us. Florida is their natural habitat. They don't live in the ocean. Let me get that straight. So one of the trivia questions people sometimes say, how many alligators live in Key West? The answer is 0. And the reason is because Key West is an island and it's surrounded by salt water. Alligators do not live in salt water. But on the peninsula of Florida, they won't say they're all over the place, but they live in all those retention ponds. But here's the good news about the alligators. They do not want any part of you. As a human being, they do not want any part of you. Rarely they're not really that aggressive. They try to stay, they try to stay away from you. You see them, I stay away from them. When I see them occasionally, we don't see them that often. I'll be honest with you. We don't see them that often. But when I do see one out in the distance in the pond, in the retention pond, I will just walk away. And that's, I think, what most people do. But that is one of the things that scares the bejesus out of people is alligators here in Florida. One of the bad things when it comes to these alligators is, so if you're walking your dog or you're leaving your dog out, they will go after them. So you have to be really careful with that. So they prey on, this is the way, what they do, they prey on small animals, birds and sea otters, and we do get sea otters here. They will drag them into the water and kill them in the water. That's what they do. So you have to be a little bit careful. If you have, I wouldn't say, they don't really go after young kids, children as much, really that often, although it's been known to happen. But when it comes to animals such as dogs and cats and whatnot, you need to be careful when it comes to alligators. And if you are in that situation, I would consider buying and you are moving to Florida, I would consider buying a fence and fence them off because they're not going to climb your fence. So one of the things that people complain about, and one of the reasons why people avoid moving to Florida, is alligators. We have other wildlife that you do not see here than in any place else in the country. One of the things that we can see a lot of is iguanas. They don't bother you, but they're a pain in the neck. We have lots of HOA communities and homeowners association communities. Some of them are able to control the iguanas better than others. But once you have an iguana manifestation in your area, we have some communities here in where we live here in Florida that where they're all over the place, because once they get there, they multiply fairly quick. Where I live, thankfully, we don't have a problem with that because our landscape team goes out of their way to to make sure they don't have the stuff that they need, that they want to eat. So that's one of the things. It's become such a problem that in a couple years back, they've actually made it legal to kill iguanas. They are not a protected species. You can't just go out and shoot them, which might be a good idea. But you can't just go out and shoot them. But it is legal to kill iguanas because they are not a protected species, because they are a bit of a nuisance when it comes to living, and one of the things you want to avoid in moving to Florida. The other thing that's funny about the iguanas is when we get these cold snaps from time to time in the winter, and they will hang out in the trees, as you can imagine, the iguanas. And when it gets too cold, they will literally freeze. I mean, like frozen solid. So they call it, when it gets really cold, they call it a frozen iguana alert. It's really funny. Frozen, yeah, I know. If you live in North, you think this is funny because I thought it was. But down here, we deal with this nonsense. We have a frozen iguana alert, a warning, because what will happen is if we get into the 30s, once in a blue moon, we'll get into the upper 30s. you'll see these things freeze in the trees, and they will literally fall to the ground. So we have falling iguana alerts here in Florida. The other thing that we have here that you don't see in other parts of the country, now they're not a nuisance, but they bother some people. We have lizards. We have most of the lizards that we see around here are like geckos, small geckos. They don't bother you. They stay away from you. They are a pain in the neck, but they don't bother you. There have been, in the years past, some invasive species that have been brought here. Like, as an example here, one of the things that they brought to South Florida is called the curly-tailed lizard, and they're big. And they have curly tails, which is why they call curly-tailed lizards. And so they, again, they don't bother you, but I don't want one of those things that big in my house. I'll tell you another one. I had this happen to me. They have something called a Jesus lizard. Yes, after you're done with this video, look it up. These things actually walk. They look like little raptors. It's crazy. They will stand up on their hind legs and walk. I had one in this office, and I'm taping this in my office here at living in Palm Beach, Florida, and I had one of them get into my house. I opened the door for like a second, and he got in. The thing was like this long, and he lived it. I had to keep my office door closed for about 2 weeks until he died. But again, they don't bother you. They're just a pain in the neck. But if that's something that bothers you, you need to avoid moving to Florida. Continuing on wildlife and avoiding Florida, let's turn to the sea. We have the climate here is so warm that when it comes to the ocean, we have a large population, relatively speaking to other parts of the country, of sharks. If you look at one of my previous videos, I think it was living in Lake Worth Beach. I actually filmed it. There was a shark scare. You have the lifeguards who watch the ocean. They will say, "Hey, listen, get everyone out of the water," because they spot sharks. The water's warm. The sharks like it. Like the shark haven is like from here in South Florida through the Bahamas, into the Caribbean. The waters are so warm, so we get all kinds of sharks here. You have to be careful. In general, you don't have to worry about if you don't go too far out, but it is something that we contend with here in Florida. So if you're afraid of sharks, don't go in the water, or better yet, maybe just avoid moving to Florida. The other thing that's dangerous in Florida in terms of wildlife is in the ocean. Again, they have jellyfish in what they call man-o'-wars, which is a serious type of jellyfish. These things are dangerous. You've got to be careful. We do have them. So we have some weird wildlife here, some of which is good and looks and is pretty and whatnot. We have some weird looking birds, but that are really cool. Sandhill cranes are really cool looking birds. But for the most part, there are some nutty things, things that scare people. So if you're afraid of this kind of wildlife, you need to avoid moving to Florida. Go ahead, hit that like button there in the corner. What that'll do is that'll help more and more people come in to see this video. It'll help us tell more and more people the story that we have to tell here in Florida. So let's recap. Number 1 reason to avoid moving to Florida is the people. Number 2 is the traffic and the roads and the craziness with that. Number 3 is the wildlife. Number 4 reasons why you need to avoid moving to Florida is the prices. The prices of homes have gotten crazy. Here we are at the end of 2022, and I suspect this will continue. There are a lot of people moving here to Florida, and because of this place that used to be an oasis and a place for a lower cost of living is not as affordable as it once was. Here at Living in Palm Beach, Florida, we look at and track the prices of homes here in Florida as a whole. And it's been crazy. We literally, I know the whole world since 2019 has the whole world and the whole country, prices have gone up. But let me say this, they have gone up faster here in Florida than any place else in the country. So people waiting to buy a home because it's not affordable while they're waiting on their home up north, as an example, what they're basically doing is watching prices on the buy side for what they're looking to buy go up faster than the appreciation they're currently enduring in other places of the country. I mean, no joke. We have places here. I track one of the factors I track, and it's one of the things that we our team here at Living in Palm Beach, Florida, looks at very closely is the price per square foot of homes. It's call our office if you want to know more about that. It is a really good gauge on looking at real estate. And so what we look at it very closely. And I remember in some of these communities that we've had, going back to 2018, 2019, the price per square foot was, let's say, about $150 per square foot. Same community is now at $310 per square foot. So, and that's fairly typical of areas. Now, there are some areas that take a little while to catch up, but they all catch up. So generally speaking, if you did not buy a house from 2019 to into 2022, the prices are pretty much, some cases double, certainly up 50%, and sometimes people are getting priced out. So one of the reasons why you might consider avoiding Florida is it's starting to get very expensive here. One of the good things when it does come to the affordability factor is it used to be that Florida did not have as many jobs. If you look at employment growth over the country and over Florida and over South Florida, as an example, in Palm Beach, it's higher here. So a lot of industry is moving here. So hopefully that helps with the affordability factor. But it used to be that that's why one of the factors that people used when it came to retire here for Florida is that the cost of living was lower. And in fact, it is. I've done some videos on moving to Florida from New York and other places. And in general, going back at least those years, and I'll have to update the numbers on this, but in general, the cost of living was at that time about 22% lower here in Florida than it was up north. I guarantee you, when I run those numbers again, that gap is going to have slowed down. We see a lot of people. I see this a lot when it comes to real estate taxes. Mind you, there's no state tax in Florida, and that's a big factor. And it's a very favorable business environment here, so that's a favorable factor. But what I'm getting at is that when it comes to the gap, things are starting to change. So you're seeing some incomes here go higher, relatively speaking. So that's one of the positives, but it's not going to happen overnight. So one of the reasons why you need to avoid moving to Florida is it is getting expensive here. One of the things I need to talk about, because we get this all the time, other parts of the country, especially when it comes to real estate, it's not the same here. Don't think what's happening in New York. Don't think what's happening in Chicago. Don't think what's happening in Michigan. Don't think what's happening in Ohio, Virginia, and any of these other places is what's happening here. I get people here that saying, now that things are slowed down, can I get a house for $100,000 less than it was last month? The answer is no, you cannot. The demand here is still very high. One of the big factors is people are they're more remote jobs. Their jobs used to be in person, now they're remote. People are creating remote jobs. So because of that, people figure out, where do I want to live anywhere in the country? And they pick Florida for that reason sometimes. And so we have, so because of that, the demand is really high. So if you're experiencing these pricing softenings and so forth in other parts of the country, it's not necessarily happening here. Here we are at the end of 2022, and this will happen. This will go into 2023. I'm sure of it. We are seeing a dichotomy, a difference in a couple of segments here in Florida. Call our team if you want to learn more about this, but the builders, the new construction builders, are going haywire. They are still selling homes like crazy. The existing home market, the people who rely only on that, those people are crying. I went to a Realty event with a bunch of realtors who focus only on that stuff, and they are not doing well. Their business is down significantly. Transactions are down about 20% from last year on existing, but new construction is thriving. And I can tell we do a lot of relocations. That's our forte, and we have strong relationships with the builders. We are a new home co-broker, so because of that, we see a lot of it, and because we have such strong relationships, people know to reach out to us. But the builders they're doing very well. Now they have incentives now because it's the end of the year, and lots of times what the builders do, they have incentives for different reasons. Today their reason is the fiscal end of the year, and they want to put sales on 2022 before it turns to 2023. It's not always the case, but in any event, there is a difference in the market here in Florida as a whole. When it comes to new construction is thriving and existing is not so much. And it's definitely different than what's happening in the other parts of the world. Call our office if you want to learn more. But again, if you're worried about affordability and whether you can afford it, well, reach out to our team. We can help guide you with that. But if that's a factor, you need to avoid moving to Florida. So the number 5, I saved the best for last. Reason why you need to avoid moving to Florida is the weather. Where do I begin? Let me begin with what you might be thinking about more than anything. And it's certainly the biggest concern when it comes to the weather, and that is hurricanes. We are in a place in the United States where we are susceptible, I should say, to hurricanes. We stick out into the ocean, and a lot of the storms form in the Caribbean and come up our way. So that's one of the things we need to be very concerned about here in Florida is the threat of hurricanes. There are several factors why this is bad and a concern. So it's not just that it's a bad storm and it's coming to you and you're going to get rain for a few days. It's much bigger than that. If you get a big enough storm, these things can be devastating. In terms of destroying your home. The one good thing about this is that the building codes over the last several decades have increased drastically. So the homes here are built they're like forts. They're built really strong. They're built basically with cinder blocks. You do not see, when you see these videos of hurricanes, just so you know, this is one of the secret that, the deadly secret the news world does not want to tell you. When you see a hurricane come through Florida and you live in the north and you watch this footage, lots of times you see those homes blowing up. They're mobile homes, or they're homes that are not built. They're older homes that are not built like they are today. In general, the homes built in the recent years, the last, let's say 20 years, are built very strong, and you don't see those blowing up like you do on the news. Trust me, that's one of the things they do. And that's how they get clicks, and that's how they scare you. But in any event, the homes are built stronger here now, but it is a concern still. The other factor, big factor, when it comes to hurricanes is the insurance. We have a big problem here when it comes to homeowners insurance. There is a lot of fraud going on with roofs and stuff like that. Call our office and I'll tell you more about that. So it is hard to get insurance. If you buy a new home, and that's one of the reasons why people are going to new construction, it is easier to get homeowners insurance on new construction. It is more affordable when it comes to getting homeowners insurance on new homes. And it's primarily because of the age of the roof. Insurance carriers feel more comfortable insuring a home that it has a new roof. And so your premiums on a newer home are a lot less than if you were to buy a home in Florida that is, let's say, 10, 15, 20, 30 years old. They are doing something, the politicians, the government, whatever you want to call it. Some are good, some are bad, like any other state. They are doing stuff to try and rectify this insurance problem we have. But like a lot of things that are become big problems, they became a big mess slowly, and it's going to be slow to correct it. Again, reach out to our office. We can guide you on what's what. But rest assured, if you move to Florida, you will most likely pay more homeowners insurance than where you live currently. One of the other reasons why you avoid living in Florida, again, on the insurance is, I talked about the traffic and all that stuff. I should have thrown this in there, but the other factor is that the car insurance, the auto insurance. Gotcha. Lost my train of thought there for a second. So we have, because of the mess, the transient people and snowbirds and people, vacationers, your insurance or your auto, it's not as bad as homeowners insurance, but your auto insurance is also a factor. So that's one of the reasons you might want to consider avoiding moving to Florida. Continuing on why you need to avoid Florida, and the weather aspect of it is, it's crazy hot here. It is humid. If you do not like humidity, Florida is not for you. It is, in the summertime, we get very high humidity. And it's not just that we are hotter in the summer than we are in other places of the country. In fact, we're about as hot as you guys in the north. The difference is we are hotter for longer. A great month to compare this is in September. You guys are cooling down in lots of places up north, September, October, and we're still in the upper 80s. So we have a very long. We start early, we end late. We have a long summer. We really don't have the four seasons like you do up north. And if you don't like that, not having four seasons, then you need to avoid moving to Florida. One of the things I did not recognize when I moved here, I've heard of it, didn't realize it, but we have, in addition to like this long, hot season, we have this crazy long rainy season. Now, what that means is that it will rain every afternoon practically in the summertime. We get a ton of rain. It rains every day. And I know it's the Sunshine State, and we do get a lot of sunshine, but in the rainy season, you can expect a lot of rain. And if you don't like that, if you can't handle getting these downpours of rain, then you need to avoid moving to Florida. The other thing that produces these thunderstorms, these thunderstorms are nasty. I mean, my daughter, the 13-year-old daughter, she runs to me, hey, what's going on? What's going on? The thunder booms are just off the charts loud. We are like the lightning capital of the world, maybe the world, I don't know, but definitely in the United States. We get so many lightning strikes. It starts fires. It does lots of bad stuff. So we have to be concerned with it. They even have this. So you don't get this in other parts of the country. We have these lightning meters. So if there's as an example, when I play softball and there's a lightning meter, if there's the lightning detected within a certain distance of that lightning meter, they will stop the game. And even though it's not really raining or if there's no lightning in your immediate area, there's a threat that it might. So they have these things that they will say, everyone needs to vacate, go inside, stop playing softball. So we have some serious threat of lightning here in Florida. The other thing that produces this lightning and this bad thunderstorm, this bad weather is we have power surges like you would not believe. So I have everything in my office, everything in my home hooked up to a backup because we lose power for no reason. It seems sometimes in the middle of the day. So it's one of the things. If that bothers you, you need to avoid moving to Florida. So once again, if you can't handle the heat, if you can't handle sweating like regularly, if you're a lady and the humidity is so high and you're worried about your hair frizzing up, which you can tell, don't have to worry about that. That's one of the things one of the reasons why you might not want to live here in Florida. The other thing I am told, and it doesn't affect me because I don't have them, is allergies. There are people who tell me that they were fine when they lived up north, and now that they're down here, their allergies have kicked up. I've heard the opposite too, where they've come down here and their allergies aren't as bad. But whatever it is that's bothering certain people, I would check out. Once I always tell people, before moving here, come check it out. See if it's a lifestyle. It really is. It's a great place for some people. It's not for everybody. And it's one of the things, it's a lifestyle that you have to get used to. Florida is so different than any other part of the country. The only way that you will know whether you need to avoid moving to Florida or love Florida is to come check it out for yourself.